Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Uncovered. I am Erik Sexton, which is actually God in German, the billion-dollar broker. So I am here with Mal Gott, which is actually God in German.
That's right.
So it's a cool thing. She's the owner of Winnie and Ethel's restaurant, which you actually won the construction on it, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's pretty cool. You don't meet a lot of people who own a restaurant. You actually own it with your husband, Aaron.
I do. That's correct.
And he's the executive chef, correct?
He is. That is also correct. I cannot cook.
I cannot cook. You just run things. So we actually know each other from EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization. We're both in the business world here in Las Vegas. And I heard your story about how you won the build out of your restaurant with a local developer, Jay Dapper. So shout out to Jay. He actually has some really cool developers or developments in town. I don't know about what it's like being a tenant or doing construction there, but why don't you tell us a little bit about how you won this competition to build out a restaurant, how you came up with the name and the idea to have a diner?
Well, as with all things, it started with love and a crush on my husband. Before I met him, I thought he was very handsome, and we actually met at he was a sous chef at another really, really well-known restaurant here in Las Vegas called Esther's Kitchen. And before they got to be really well-known, and before they were even really known at all, I lived right around the corner from that restaurant when that part of the city, the Arts District, was in the earliest stages of being rehabilitated. And so Esther's was one of the first places to go in. And it was a nice place to go have dinner. And also at the time, I was not yet working for myself. And so I would head there and, have a drink, have dinner, do my work, do my email, whatever. And I got to be well known there as a regular. And then about a year and a half in, this very handsome guy started to be in the pass, which is the part of the kitchen where the food comes out and gets handed off to the servers. And I saw him and never spoke to him for 2.5 years.
It's a double whammy. He can cook and he's good looking.
I know. I got very lucky, but it was like a slow build. So finally, after quite a while, I worked up the gumption and I sent him a message through Instagram. And I said, hey, I've seen you, would you want to get coffee? That coffee date, fast forward, ended up being a long, courtship. Not that long. It was like 9 months. We got engaged. And we had talked at that point about wanting to do something together. My background is in event design and interior design and architecture, and his is in, obviously, the culinary and hospitality industry. And we talked about wanting to do something together, and lo and behold, about 2 months after we had that conversation, the contest popped up in a news article that I saw on my phone, and I sent it to him right before the holidays of 2021, and I said, hey, I think we should throw our hats in the ring. Fast forward again, and we ended up submitting a proposal for Winnie and Ethel's Downtown Diner. It's named after my husband's grandma Winnie and my great-grandma Ethel, who are both two very, very cool ladies. And the acronym from their names, the initials say the word or create the word we, which is what we really wanted. It's about us. It's about the community where we live and have the restaurant. It's about this sense of kind of homey comfort, that feeling that we got being around, each of those women respectively. So we submitted the proposal. We got selected as a finalist team, which was in and of itself a huge boon. We were the only people of the 6 finalist groups that had not previously owned or currently were owning and operating restaurant concepts. And then we went through the competition, and that included a couple of public pop-up events. So we chose to do full tilt marketing and, make sure that we really got the word out, social media, all this stuff, even before we knew if we were going to get a
You
concept.
had a bit of a background in that, though, right? Because you had another business that was restaurant events.
Yeah. So when I, at the time, and still have that business and get to use it a lot at Winnie and Ethel's, I own an experiential design firm. Yeah, have and had and still have. An experiential design firm, which combines those two fields of event design and then interior design and architecture. So it takes this idea of creating a feeling through all of these various touch points, marketing being a huge component, but not just, kind of the things people often think about, branding or email or whatever. Also, what the experience is when people walk in the door, so to speak, how they engage with what you're doing, what the space feels like and looks like. Yeah.
So in the competition, you kind of had you've had some experience in this pop-up thing. So back to that, you had to actually do pop-up restaurants.
Yep.
How many of those did you have to do?
So during the competition, we only did 2,
Okay.
but subsequently, after we found out that we had in fact won, we did 5 or 6 more, and all of those were, full tilt marketing, event planning, getting people registered, getting ticketing going, making sure that the word got out, and tracking and designing the experience for people once they had registered. So yeah, I got to use all of that long years of doing events and then doing spatial design, ephemeral spaces, so pop-up spaces, and all that marketing and branding and outreach. I got to use all that stuff and coalesce it around what my husband does really well, which is to cook incredible food that people pretty much, as far as we can tell, try and generally are like, holy cow, that's great. I've gotta have more.
That's I can attest to that. Your restaurant has great food. So what year did you actually? So when did you find out that you won this competition to get the restaurant?
Yeah, so we found out in May of 2022, and then we opened the doors to the public on November 4th of 2023. So it was a pretty lengthy stretch from notified that we won, which was of course incredible, to actually being able to open the doors.
The high of winning and then having to deal with building out a restaurant. So this is
Yeah.
what I'm interested in. So I'm a commercial real estate broker. I've been in
Yep.
town for 20 years. We've been involved with all kind of businesses. So from the day you won, how long did it take to get the design and then get your permits pulled during like the construction period? Because that's always a hell of a thing to navigate. You're like, I'm going to build a restaurant. Now you get to actually do it, and
Yeah.
hiring contractors and architects,
Yeah.
and then having the developer involved along. Like, what? Tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
that process.
so it was an interesting process, and it was the first time I've gone through everything from the earliest inception to the actual final approval and getting a stamp of approval to open the doors. What was interesting to me was that from where I was sitting, because of my background, I was gung ho, and really Aaron was as well, on making sure, because we wanted to get that bad boy open, right? Like that's our source of income. So we were really gung ho about getting all of the design stuff done, getting the renderings done. He had to do all the work to do the kitchen layout with the architects and select all the equipment. And we really put the
It's your
pedal
first
to the
time
metal.
going through this.
Yeah, for this scale, yeah. So, and for him, definitely laying out a commercial kitchen. He's worked in them forever, but he's never had to build one out.
That's like driving a car and building a car.
At the same time, yeah. And also trying to think about all the permutations of, this is what we think we want to do in terms of what we're going to cook and how the cooking line is going to work when we open, but also having enough adaptability that as things evolve, you haven't painted yourself into a corner where you have a setup that no longer serves the evolution of your menu and like what you need to do in terms of food ordering. There's a lot of like doing it for now and doing it for the future and trying to account for that. So we felt like we really put the pedal to the metal, and then and I don't say this in any kind of disparaging way, this was our experience. We had this period of about 6 months where we just couldn't get our hands around whether there was issues with permitting, that because we weren't directly managing that process. That was through the development company, whether there were issues obtaining them or they were just delayed because there were other projects going on and they just weren't, in the queue in the same speed that we thought that they were going to be in the queue in.
It's construction. I've got half a dozen clients that are dealing with the same thing. It's either a contractor or the building permit or the building department gets delayed. They're just slammed.
It was, yeah. So
it's frustrating.
We got to probably August of 2023, or excuse me, is that right? 22. And we felt like, okay, I would say by September at the latest of 22, we were like, okay, we're ready to go. Like renderings are done, kitchen layout, we've got equipment selected, things like that. And the construction really didn't start in earnest until probably, I want to say January of 23. And when I say the construction, I mean not the fun, pretty stuff that everybody thinks about at the end when you see a home improvement show.
Nice fancy floors and.
Yeah, no, this was like, we're gonna, chisel out the concrete floor to lay the correct plumbing, and we're gonna, do some of the structural framing around the exterior and like put HVAC units up. So like it was not even the fun stuff. It was just that early stuff that started in late January. And then, it took some time. Like we got our permit approved about 8 days before we officially opened to the public. So it was like
right up
against it. Yeah.
What's a piece of advice you could give somebody who was going to build out a restaurant, or honestly do any kind of construction build out, that something you didn't know until you started doing it that is now obvious if you had to do it again, that you might do differently, or just something, a tip to somebody who's going to build out a restaurant or any kind of build out that they need to manage?
Yeah. So a couple things that I learned along the way that I, apply in situations where you're collaborating with, in our case, a developer who was footing the bill, which I know is not a unique experience.
That's a one of a kind. I've never actually heard that. Where they'll give you a tenant improvement allowance.
They'll give you a TI,
but winning something where they did that is really cool.
But I would say even if you're collaborating with just a general contractor and you're the person that's footing the bill, there are two things that I think in hindsight I would have done differently had I known. The first would have been to be really clear on what the payment and ordering structure of different materials is, so that I could have had more realistic expectations about when and how I could pull the trigger on ordering things and how long it would take to pay those bills.
Okay.
And I say that because we had a lot of things teed up that we knew were ready to be ordered far before the time frame when they actually got ordered. And I didn't understand that, my thinking was let's, and I even offered this, let's get this stuff ordered and just have it sitting in a warehouse so that as soon as it's time for those pieces to go in, they're ready to go. And had I known ahead of time a little bit differently, I probably would have asked the question about when is the drop dead date, so that I know I have to order it by this time frame, and you guys can't say no to me after this date. You have to let me order it, because we did run into some stress that I think we could have avoided if we'd known that, or if we'd had that conversation. The other thing that is not a revelation by any means, but I cannot overemphasize this for anyone who's going to undertake this project. Be your own advocate. Make sure that you're very aware of what you need in order to advocate and can be persistent about getting those things. And I don't mean be annoying or disrespectful, but if you're working with even your own general contractor that you've sourced, you are not their only project.
Yeah.
And you are not their only priority. And so if you're not, even the best ones, and we had a good GC, but if you're not,
who did the build out?
Dapper Build.
Oh,
so they
it was
have
his
their,
GC.
Yeah, it was his GC. But and they did a great job. They were great partners with us. And if I had not been willing to be on top of it, and not just through email, but through text, through phone calls, using multiple means of communication to try to get the answers, sometimes going directly to the vendors, I think things would have slipped even more than they did in terms of delays. And for someone who is building out on their own, for whom it is even more critical to get the doors open, you have to be willing to be your own advocate and invest the time to know what you need and go get it and stay on top of it.
Yeah. Paying contractors when you're doing a build out is a whole process in itself. There's actually third-party companies that, let's say you are building out let's say you're building out your restaurant and you were doing a loan to do the actual build out from the bank. That bank is going to hire a third-party vendor to come inspect as your improvements are happening.
Yeah.
It's almost like a voucher program. So the inspector will come and be like, okay, the floors were put in. They tell the bank pays the contractor whatever percentage. So having to deal the way you did it, I've never even actually experienced that, where the developer winning the contractor. Winning the competition and then having to do that. That's a new way to do it. I just did a building where they the contractors were happy because the owner was just paying cash. So every time they sent him a bill, he just kept paying them, and the contractors were like, "Find us more clients like this." And I'm like, "That's super rare to do." So you'd say the biggest piece of advice to somebody who having to manage their own construction is just be vocal and make sure that your contractor knows, you're on top of what they're doing.
But do also understand, in the scenario that you described, it sounds like it's much more common. Understand what your payment terms are so that you're not hamstrung by the bank needing net 60 or longer in a lot of cases to pay those bills. Contractors are aware of that, but sometimes vendors are not, or or they're used to working with larger companies who have much higher credit limits because they're sourcing, if you're working for a design and architectural firm like an SKG, let's say, that's sourcing for tons, millions of dollars worth of projects every year, and you're coming in and you have what is absolutely a huge build for one person, but a $750,000 build, they're used to being able to take a credit card payment and have their money right away.
Yeah.
And for you may not have a $750,000 revolving line of credit that you can just tap a card down and then in 60 days your bank cuts you the check. So understand that, and the great news is that we were even in situations when I was going directly to vendors, when I explained it to them, in many cases they were amenable to it. They just needed to know up front, and then I wasn't getting frustrating emails from them about why they hadn't received checks from the paying party. It was a lot easier to communicate with them that way.
What was something that was just totally threw you off during the construction? Maybe something that like was there one thing that pops out in your mind where you're like, I can't believe that this is how it works, or something that happened that was just a total out of left field?
So one thing that did make me have an eyeball twitch was with the restaurant equipment ordering. So again, like a lot of my background in the event side, but even in the design and architectural side, is a lot of project management, which also exists in construction, of course. And this is where some of that being really vocal and really clear about what the drop dead dates were for us. We had someone who was providing our restaurant equipment, and we had that list finalized for months. Like, my husband was on it. He really made sure everything
Knew what he
wanted. When they said, hey, we need to have you modify some specs for space reasons or whatever, which is like a normal part of any build out, he made those adjustments quickly because we never wanted to be the bottleneck. And so we found out at one point that, the person, the company responsible for getting the equipment order placed, the owner just was going to go on vacation for 3 weeks. And we found out about 2 days beforehand that he was like, oh, I'll be on vacation, I'll place your order when I come back. But if that had happened, it would have been a 3+ week delay on opening. And my jaw hit the floor. I was like, what, how does someone do business like this? Like, that's not an answer to just say, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. And so again, without being disrespectful or rude, because I don't believe in that stuff, we were real emphatic with the GC. I was like, if I need to physically go there after hours and meet them and watch them put the order in, or you do, or someone does, like, 3 weeks can't be the answer. A 3 week delay. Because we didn't have money. Like, we were like, we got to open this place, like our mortgage is still coming due. We don't have 3 weeks, And so that was crazy to me.
I'd love to hear that, because this is a perfect example of the entrepreneurial spirit in this country, and especially Las Vegas. Like, you're like, I need to get this done no matter what, and you're like, I'm gonna go bang on this guy's door to get this answered. And that is really somebody who's like hungry, and there's not literally, but well, maybe.
Very good.
But
hungry, yeah, that's a good pun.
People don't understand, like, opening a business business is hard.
Yeah.
And it's stressful.
Yeah.
And especially when you're trying to open one. I knew you before the restaurant had opened, and it's stressful. And like, to watch you before it opened and now, like, you still have a lot going on, but
yeah,
at least it's open now. But I give you all the credit in the world for having that tenacity and aggression, because that's what it takes to run a business. And you, to do that, I mean, that shows a level of success. So anyways,
and I want to say, for anyone who's listening to this, yes, it does. But also, always want to be very honest about the other part of it, which is that you also saw me break down and cry a ton and have a really hard days, because my brain was like, why do I have to be this proactive? This is crazy. Why is this required of me to another owner of a business? But so that's part of it too, is like those moments of and there were many of just really overwhelming frustration, but still being able to have those moments and then go, well, I still have to do this thing. Like, the why is less important than just, I need to take this step to get this next part moving.
I think any business owner who owns a business or runs a business has a moment where you just emotionally get overwhelmed, and then you're like, okay, it's time to put on my big boy pants. I have to go down and handle my business, and that's what you did. I mean, I've eaten at your restaurant a handful of times now. Okay, so you guys get open.
Yeah.
You did a soft opening, which I was at, which was really fun to see. hear about this whole process and see the stress you get open. How is it working with your husband? That's I don't. I'm gonna go there.
Go there.
Yeah. How does that work? I know you're kind of more on the operational side, and he's he makes the things you eat.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit how that is running a business with your husband?
Yeah. So we are, I would say, on the whole, 10 out of 10. There are days where we absolutely are at loggerheads. There are days where probably I won't speak for him. I will presume that, like me, he looks at me and says, like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you see this the way that I see it? We are lucky, and it's a great strength, and also can be, things that we bump heads on the most. We have complementary skill sets. So he is very nimble and flexible and creative, and also extremely organized in the areas where it is most critical for the type of work he does, which is kitchen management, things like food waste, which don't sound exciting or important when you think of culinary. Like, you never hear about that on Food Network. But, that kind of stuff is what can make or break a business like a restaurant from the largest expense side that you have, which is the food. Sure. I am all about process and repeatability and systems, and even in the way that we market, there's a lot of structure that I either have in place or am actively always trying to put in place. So those two things are very complementary, except that we also work very differently, right? So he's more about, like, I know it in my head. Everybody that I work with, we communicate about how we do things, but it's kind of just like a known understanding. Whereas I'm saying, like, dorky tech terms, like, there shouldn't be a single point of failure. We need to introduce redundancies and blah, 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 blah. And we need to do things in sequence, So it is like, when we both, I won't speak for him. Let me take that back. It's
a smart decision to have a successful relationship. Just speak for your other half.
Well, and like, I'm not him, but when I choose to see it from that perspective, which is that we both bring really valuable attributes to the table, and the reality is neither one of us could do this without the other person or someone who had the same level of expertise and style of working. Like, you'd have to find a clone basically of this person.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a gift there, to be married to somebody you
who
can work with.
Do this
complement each other. Yin and yang.
Yeah, and the fact that we can do that, and then that we can actually go home and still like each other and want to spend time together. Like, that is not lost on me at all. And I when I look at it that way, and when I think about it from that perspective, we're very, very fortunate. There are days where something goes wrong, or the restaurant is stressful, or we're tired, or, the house isn't clean, or whatever, right? Or, like, the bank account is low, or bills are coming due, and we're going, oh my God, like, where's the money going to show up? And, in those moments, it's easy to also do what anybody does with someone that is very close to them, which is to, snap at someone or be short with them. And so I also have to make sure, and I have people around me that help me with this, that I stay real accountable, that I don't, just because he is my husband, I don't have the latitude to be like, well, I can just talk to you this way. I wouldn't do it to a colleague who wasn't married to me. I sure don't have the liberty to do it to someone who is.
So now that the restaurant, thank you for sharing that. That's, I couldn't, I mean, that's, I always find that admirable when people, you're able to balance a personal relationship and a professional one.
But yeah, I've also Googled articles like, can you work with your spouse? Like, I've read stuff in Inc. and Forbes, and, like, just general, like, what is it like to work with your, so it is that there are definitely moments where I'm like, maybe this was a huge mistake, but not because of him, just because it's hard. It's hard. And, so yeah, it's both sides of the coin.
Relationships can be hard, and business is incredibly hard. Put them
together and watch how it goes.
So how do you like running a restaurant now that you're open and running?
It's hard.
It's hard. Yeah, if you're in business, it's just hard.
It's tough.
No, but I mean, it's got to be rewarding to see you built something. I mean, being in commercial real estate as a broker.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of the business. Is I meet a client who has an idea, and we start finding the right location for them to run their business, and they go in there and it's an idea, and then a year later they've got employees and they're either manufacturing something or selling food, and then years later it's growing and they need more space. To see that journey is incredible. Like, that's why honestly, like, real estate is fun, but, like, to see people come up with an idea and execute on it is, like, the coolest thing in the world for me to see. But, like, what's your favorite part of running a restaurant?
One of the things, there are two things that I really love. So one thing that I love is that we, even in the short time that we've been open, so as of the time we're recording this, it's just over 4 months that we've been open to the public. We have been invited, quote unquote, into so many cool things in people's lives. So we've had people come in who've just gotten married. We've had people come in who are bringing their baby out to dinner or lunch for the first time, and they're, tiny baby. We've had people come in who are having family reunions. We've had people come in who've done political fundraisers. So to get to be get these vignettes into people's lives and hear about their stories and be a part of it, like the first couple that came in that had just been married and they brought their family, it was like 9 or 10 people. I think about that kind of stuff and I'm like, 25 years from now, like we will still be a part of that story for those people. And we won't probably know, I don't remember their names. I don't know where life will take them. But that vignette is awesome to be like, yeah, we get to be involved in people's lives.
Part of their story. Do you get is it more receptive with people? Because you're, you and your husband are in the restaurant. So when somebody comes in like that, like the owners that are working and greeting you, versus a chain. I mean, the world we're in now is just everything's a chain on every corner, which is, especially in Las Vegas, I think it's really unique to have a independently owned restaurant. Like, do you get people, customers liking that element, and that's why they come back to you, because it is, it is owned by a couple that's in there working, and they feel like they're part of the family kind of situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had people comment to me that they can't believe an owner is coming around and talking to people at tables, or also doing some of the less glamorous stuff like bussing tables or taking orders or greeting people at the door. They're like, wow, that's really cool. And so yeah, we benefit from that in some ways. Sometimes I get a little nervous because the intention is not for us to be in there all day, every day, in perpetuity, but slay one dragon at a time, I guess. But yeah, to be able to interact with people and hear their stories. And I mean, just like literally yesterday, I had a gal who just got married, and they come in, their regulars. She messaged us, direct messaged us on social media to say, we're loving what you guys have put up on social. We're sorry we couldn't come in right before the wedding, but we can't wait to come back. It's like they're in Europe on their honeymoon, and they're sending. I'm like, that's a gift to be able to be in people's lives. But to be fair,
your social media is really good. I was watching it the other day. It was really windy here in Las Vegas, and you did these videos about the chairs are bolted down. I mean, it's comical. So what's your it's usually at the end of these things, but what's your Instagram handle, the restaurant?
Oh yeah, so it's at Winnie and Ethel. It's very simple, just to find the two names. Yeah,
I would strongly encourage people to follow them. It's very entertaining, and it'll also has some good pictures of food.
That's right.
That makes me hungry, which is the whole point of it. So what's a high and a low you can tell me as far as like once the restaurant's open and you've been open for a few months and you're off to the races? Like what's something where you're like, we're open. We've made it. My husband and I built this, like a high point where you're like, did you take a step back and see it built, or like give me an example where you're like, wow, we made this happen through all the emotions and work.
So there were two moments that I think were really what you're describing. One was the night before we opened to the public. We just went over there and sat in the restaurant for just like 5 minutes. We just went and sat in there and then we went next door and had pizza. But it was just this moment for the two of us to go, holy cow, like we're nervous. Tomorrow we're going to open to the public. We don't know what's going to happen from here on. But for this 5 minutes, this is something that we did together that is pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
And then a couple weeks later, because we opened in early November, my sister and my 3 nieces and my brother-in-law came out for Thanksgiving. And we went to the pizza place again because it was a Monday night. So we close at 2 on Mondays. But we got some pizza, and I brought my nieces and my sister next door. And the girls, they're 10, 8, and 6, and they got to eat at the countertop. And my niece was like, wait, we can just be in here? And I was like, yeah, this is like,
it's mine.
Your uncle and I own this, And they were like, but what if the police come and and how will they know? And I was like, well, there's this business license on the door and da 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 da. But to have the kids go, wait a minute, you can just come, like nobody goes in a restaurant when it's not open, and have them realize that it was Erin's and mine and be able to do that with them. that was very, very cool. So those were a couple of really high point moments early on.
That's really cool. But that's an example you're setting like to them. I mean, what ages were they?
Yeah, 10, 6, and 8.
You said that. So 10, 6, and 8, they're seeing like, oh my God, I can own my own business and do that kind of thing that's obtainable. And if you're not around that,
it's just not part of your worldview, which I was not. My parents were both public school teacher and administrator, which I think is amazing and very admirable work. But entrepreneurship was not in my worldview until my mid 30s. So yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, so you had those moments where your nieces and nephew were like, oh my, they own this, and you're sitting there like, yeah, this is mine.
This is pretty cool.
What's a tough spot where you hit once you open where you're like, what did I do? Why am I doing this?
Yeah, so one that maybe even a month ago I would not have shared because I would have been embarrassed that it makes us look foolish, which I don't think is the case, was that about a month into being open, we actually found out that a person we had hired into a general manager role had stolen several $1,000s from us. And man, when you talk about not only just the impact of knowing that every penny still at this stage is critical to being able to pay your bills on time and that kind of stuff, and that money was taken from us, and also just to feel like, how did I not see this? Like, what am I dumb? Whatever.
You don't know what you don't know, though. It's your first time running the restaurant.
Right, exactly. And
now you can spot it like a hawk, probably.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the things that it's allowed us to do now in terms of controls and redundancies, there's that nerd word again, but like it in the long term, very beneficial. In the 24 to 48 hours when it happened and seeing, up close what, of course it affected me, and also watching it affect my business partner, who is my husband, who just was like, what more can happen? What else? That was pretty brutal. That was a brutal 48 hours. Yeah.
Your emotional tank filling up.
Yeah.
It's in the entrepreneurial world or owning a business. We deal with a lot of, as on the real estate side, when we're renting or selling buildings to people, we see people's financials, and there's this perception that every business owner is just printing money. They're all millionaires, and they don't realize, like a lot of business owners, you own a job because everything stops with you. If somebody doesn't show up, guess who's there doing that job? Dishwashing or cleaning up. You're the one filling in all the roles, and it's hard. And so I see a lot of financials of businesses, and their gross revenue might be huge. They're doing millions of dollars, but their profit margin is razor thin. And at the end of the day, they need to pay their bills, and that profit margin, is what pays the owner. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to see what the profit margin of these businesses actually look like. So that's why when you're saying someone steals from you, and that also stings. Like, you open something up personally. I mean,
absolutely.
I know what that feels like, where you open up they become kind of part of your family and your routine, and then they're stealing from you, and you're paying them. It's like a double whammy.
Yes, absolutely.
So you guys got through that hurdle. I'm assuming you fired them.
Yes, that person was definitely dismissed, and we.
It's a better word. Dismissed.
Yeah, we and also we hot tip. We were very glad that we took the employee theft insurance coverage because we were able to actually recuperate that money, or we will get it soon. So if you think like, well, maybe I don't need this, or maybe I don't need and it's different lines of business have different needs, but disaster insurance, like we have a lot of. Literally food, that if we had windstorms last weekend,
power goes out
and you lose $15,000, $20,000 worth of food, like that we did not, thankfully, but we had that coverage in place. So when our stomachs dropped because our power did go out for 3 hours, we were able to say, okay, worst case scenario, we've got this covered. But yes, we did move through that, and slowly now, a couple months later, are getting to the steps where we're going to hopefully get pretty much all that money back. So.
That's actually a great point that you brought up, is the insurance. I mean, people think there's just business insurance. It's like, it's even just car insurance. I mean, people who aren't own a business or have to get business insurance. I mean, you think about it, is car insurance. There's 50 different policies you can get. You're right. I mean, you can get theft insurance, or like if your business closes for some reason, like you use the example of the wind and power going out, what do you call it? Spoilage.
Yeah.
And all that goes bad. You have to throw that out. I mean, that's money you're not going to get, because you're obviously not selling that food.
Right.
How did you go through finding the right insurance policy? Did you find a good insurance broker that you met with, or like was that your first time being through that? Walk me through how you decided to get that the theft insurance.
I was gonna say, I have and had different types of business insurance for my design firm. However, being a services firm, those types of insurance were, number one, far fewer, and number two, much different. So like when you're looking at services, you're insuring against someone saying that you failed to uphold your service contract or you were grossly negligent, like those types of things, right?
Okay.
When it came to the restaurant business, and I think this has been a big learning for me, and I'm glad that I've learned it relatively quickly. Very, very fast, I was like, you know what? I have to get over trying to act like I know things, because I've done my career for 20 years, because there's just tons that I don't know about this. And so we did find a broker through someone that I know, an insurance broker, and longstanding brokerage here in Las Vegas. And I asked them for coverage, and then I had that, I spent time with that person, and I, not that he wasn't happy to do it, but I made him walk me through every single part of that insurance coverage. And if I didn't understand something the first way he explained it, I asked him to explain it a different way, because the last thing I wanted was to allow my pride and ego to be like, okay, cool, yeah, I got it, when I didn't know what I had. And so we did end up getting employee theft coverage, and if we'd had the spoilage or the lost revenue as a byproduct of a natural disaster. So we got all these coverages, and it's expensive. I mean, it's not cheap insurance, but I'm very glad we did it. It's already paid dividends for us.
So you sounds like when you don't know what you don't know,
yes.
Find an expert to guide you through that stuff.
Yes,
I would give that advice. Anything you're doing in business, find a lawyer who specializes in lease negotiation.
Yep.
So like if you're renting a restaurant, don't hire a criminal defense attorney to look at your lease. Find somebody who specializes in that stuff. The insurance is such a big thing. We have that in the commercial world too. There's 50 different policies, and everybody's got their own opinion.
Yep.
And you need to find the right one, obviously, that fits for you. So, okay. So you guys, how long? So the restaurant's been open, I'm sorry, you've said this a couple times.
4 months.
So 4 months, totally open.
Totally open.
How was it finding employees? I mean, I'm sure there was a process. Just sighs there.
Just a gentle sigh. So
I mean, your team was great when I was there. The people who were they were all nice and diligent. And
So no, and the gentle sigh is more that for me. So it's just been such a learning curve for me, because I came out of professional services, and the way that industry exists, I just took for granted certain things, like the interview process is one way. It's usually for professional services, it's a longer lead up to an interview. You're trying to vet someone for a longer time, but you also know once you hire them, except in some extenuating circumstances, that person's probably going to be with you for a while. And except again, in some bizarre circumstances, if they're going to move on, they're going to give you notice. There's a transition period. Like those are some established things from corporate style environments, in my experience, whether it's an actual, large corporate environment or even an entrepreneurial one. You just, those are things that I took for granted as the norm across any place that you hire. Not the case. Not the case in the restaurant industry, at least so far. We do have several people now who have been with us since we opened.
Okay.
And the initial hiring process, we weren't physically open yet. So it was this interesting dance of like, we can't hire too early, because then we have to bring people in and pay them before we're making money, because we have to train them. But we also can't hire too late, because then they won't be trained when we open. And so we had to, find people who were willing to, and it sounds to me, to my brain from 20 years of like more corporate experience, finding someone who would wait 2 weeks to start doesn't seem like a big deal. But in the restaurant and hospitality industry, especially here in Vegas, they can have 5 more job offers in that period of time that will have them start that day or the next day.
Really? I didn't know
it's super wild. So, and at the time we were also kind of gently competing, I say that with big air quotes, against 2 other large hotel properties that were hiring tens of thousands of employees, right? So we had the Fountain Blue and the Durango Casino.
We're opening,
and so they were both opening in December, and they're hiring people, and that training, they have a way larger bankroll to train people for a prolonged period of time. And those jobs are, in both cases, union, and so there's benefits inherent to those that as an independent company we didn't have the ability to offer at that time. So it was this interesting, like, We have to get people who can wait a little bit, but they won't wait too long, and we have to train them. So that process was one thing. And then the process of hiring in active service. So when someone leaves or when someone, I had not experienced this either, just stops coming to work. Just doesn't
no
come,
notice, no text.
nothing.
They just don't
They
show
just
up.
don't know. And like,
Welcome to business.
I'm thinking they're dead, because I've never experienced
funny,
that.
but-
No, but I've never, like, again,
You just think there's something wrong.
I
but
think
they
there's
just,
something wrong, and I don't get a call back. And then after like the second or third time that happened, which is like, at first I had this existential crisis. Are we managing people wrong? Are we doing this badly? Like, do they hate it? And then talking to my husband, who's been in the industry a lot longer, he's like, no, unfortunately, that's the great side about it is there are always people available to fill roles, right? You can find people quickly. The other side of it is that people will do things that, for me, I was like, no, you don't just stop going to a job and not give any notice. Like that's
crazy, right?
That's crazy, right? Well, turns out it's not always that crazy. So it's been an evolution, and I continue to be challenged to look at things from where they actually exist now versus saying, well, it shouldn't be like this because it's not my experience in the past. It's like, no, this is part of it. Insulate where you can. Make sure that you're doing things so that you're limiting that by creating a good workplace and by having hiring practices that vet to the extent that you can vet. And also know that that's just at least some segment of the reality of this particular industry is that will happen. And so you can't make sure that you're looking at yourself and that you're not creating the problem, but also understand that some of that's just a natural byproduct of the way this industry functions.
So finding people can be tough, but the good thing, just not to discourage people in business.
No.
Once you find a good person though, and they click, because it goes both ways.
Absolutely.
I mean, it needs to be a good fit for the employee and for you. Once you find them, it just clicks sometimes, and it's awesome when you find the right people. It's really rewarding, and they get opportunities to get raises and better tips and more responsibility and this growth. So you and your husband, you guys won this competition. You built out the restaurant. Now it's open.
Yes.
And I like to say I was watching from afar as this happened. And it's absolutely awesome to see this place open. So what's the goal now with you guys? I know it's only 4 months, but you're running, you're up and running, and it goes by quickly. I mean, it'll be this
4
time.
months is flown. That's crazy that I couldn't believe that when we hit March 4th. I was like, oh my gosh, it's already been a third of a year.
Right.
Like that's for financial stuff. That's crazy.
Yeah, welcome to the business world.
Whoa.
So what's the next goal? Like, do you have a milestone you're trying to hit with the business that like what's the next step for you and your husband in this business?
So the next step for us was looking at when we could go. So we're 6 days a week, and we weren't sure whether we wanted to extend hours on the days that we were open or add the 7th day. And we had some ideas, but we were kind of tiptoeing around it. And we finally, about a week ago, have made the decision about adding some hours on one of the strongest performing days that we have, which is Sunday, but then also adding the 7th day of service. And so those are big goals. That'll be happening in the next month. And what's so big about that is that adding the 7th day now means that in order for us to continue to take even 1 or 2 days off a week, we have to have a team in there that can run that thing without us being there. So like
goes from owning a job to owning a business.
Owning a business, and like what you said, for all of the challenges that we have experienced with sometimes people not doing what you are hopeful that they will do, like give you a notice period that you can do business with, whatever. We've also got this great core of people who we've started to now entrust with more of those responsibilities, and they've absolutely risen to the occasion. The fact that I can even be recording this on a Friday morning when the restaurant is open. Now, my husband is there in the kitchen, but I'm not there in the front of the house watching things. And it's been that way for a while, where I'm there for, half the day, or I'm there for several hours during the day. But we have other people who now are doing certain things that I was doing from end to end when we first opened. So that's a huge milestone. We are hopefully going to be getting to a place in the third quarter of this year where we're getting ready to launch some packaged food products that are our own proprietary recipes. Cool. Yeah, so
starting the food line.
Yeah, selling them in the restaurant at least to start. But the idea is that we've got some stuff that Erin's created, which is super delicious, and also stuff that people can purchase and use outside of the restaurant. So that's a goal. I hesitate to say it because it's terrifying. Our big goal is to go 24 hours a day and sometime in 2024. So to go to 24-hour diner service, which is a huge goal. We don't have a date on that.
It's doable. We'll be talking this time next year.
Yeah, I was going to say, it could be December 31st at 11:59 p.m.
I'll be there.
Yeah. And then the last one, because I do think it's important to say this, we have a goal that by January 31st of 25, we will take a 1-week vacation to Hawaii where we are offline for at least 3 days of that vacation, where we do nothing, touch nothing in the business. And that is a huge goal because that really drives us to get certain stuff in place so that we can monitor our business without having to physically be there to watch what's going on. So
sounds like you have your goals pretty clear.
I have some help from some people. Yeah.
That's good. No, the goal setting is important, but that's important to see scaling up too. What you just said, you opened up the restaurant, you had your set hours, and now you're like, okay, we've got this process, which is smart. A lot of people, they just go open all the time, or they try to service everything, and you're slowly scaling up and adding goals, which is smart because you can figure out what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
So you're adding hours, you're adding potentially a day.
Yep.
You're staffing up so you can step away a little bit and focus more on, the packaged food, which is really cool. And also being able to build a business, and kudos to you and your husband, to be able to train people to where you can step away.
Yeah.
And that is the big difference of owning a job and owning a business. So like that's the goals are really important. Yeah. You and I had this conversation the other day where, like, when you're setting a goal, it's super important to be really crystal clear on what you want to do and write it out and come up with timelines. And it doesn't need to be exact, but when you write it down, it becomes real.
Yes.
So I think that's great that you're doing that. Okay, so you guys have the win. I think this time flies by when we're doing this. This is my first one. This is the inaugural.
The
This isn't the name of the. Yeah, it's the pilot. This is the pilot.
The christening. Yeah, that's right.
So you guys, you're going to be running right back to the restaurant when we're done here.
Pretty close to. I've got a couple errands I need to run, which are restaurant related.
Of course.
I'm also going to get myself a little, either a boba tea or coffee, because I do find that taking snippets of time to just be even 20 or 30 minutes right now is more realistic. And that's a lesson I've had to learn too. You're not going to get a whole day, but take your 20 minutes and use your 20 minutes to your advantage.
That is a great tip. When you're running busy days, you don't need to have a whole day off. I mean, even 15 minutes to yourself. Leave your cell phone in the car, go into the coffee shop, grab something to read, or just stare at the planes. We're here. We're near the airport. You can just sit here and watch planes go.
That's right.
Landing. Just take a minute to yourself is a huge reset. Okay. Wrapping up here, what are 2 tips that you would give somebody who is looking to open any type of business? It could be business, it could be restaurant specific, but what are 2 tips that you could give them if they're right now, it's just an idea and they're like, I want to open this business?
Okay, so I will give one practical and one that is something I come back to as a touchstone for me that is, I won't say philosophical, but it is more intangible, let's say it that way. So from a practical standpoint, and like I said earlier, I'm very much the operations and the analytical person in our business partnership. Okay. But I am a strong believer, and I have learned through this process, that finding a banking partner, a true partner that will help you walk through, even before you necessarily know what you can afford or what you can do, how to get yourself in a position where you understand what it's going to take and you can present a strong financial case, and know how to manage your finances as your business is growing and use credit. That is huge. And a lot of people, before they own their own business, even if you've had experience managing large budgets for someone else, it's just a different ballgame when you need to know your own stuff. So finding that banking partnership and really working with them as a partner is huge. You lean on them when you find someone that you like.
Have you found, sorry to interrupt you, but have you found, being a small business, it's better to deal with like a local bank, or like one of the big big banks like B of A or Wells Fargo?
Yeah. So we've actually done. So we started with a regional bank, local regional bank. They have, I think, branches in maybe 3 or 4 states, but they started here in Las Vegas, and then we've now gone ahead and added a second banking relationship because they bring different value as a partner that is more local versus a national bank that has resources that just a regional is not going to have. So they each have their own, they're complementary to each other.
Yeah. So find a bank that gets your business and gets you.
Yep.
And
we'll pick up the phone for you. Like for me at least, that was really important. And it's been super helpful to be able to physically call someone and say, I don't know like what this is or why this is happening or what am I seeing here? And they actually will take the time to have 5
So a lot of times it might not even be the bank. It's just the person you're dealing with. So relationships.
Yes.
Find a banker
that
at
will
a
help
bank.
You. Yeah. That will teach you, will grow with you, absolutely.
Strategic partner. That's a great piece of advice. And what's the second one?
The second one is one that my dad gave me when I was about 22 years old, and I was trying to decide whether to move from Chicago to Atlanta to take a new job or stay in Chicago and see whether or not this new budding relationship that I had was going to go somewhere. And I was supposed to give my employer the next day my decision about whether to relocate or not. And I called my dad and I said, I really don't know what to do. I'm really torn. I can you just help me? I don't know. And he goes, okay, do you have a quarter anywhere? And I was like, yeah, why? He goes, go ahead and flip it. And whatever comes up, that's what you do. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, but here's the kicker, Mal. If when you flip that coin, you're really hoping one side comes up, then you already know the answer. It's just a matter of whether or not you will go ahead and allow yourself to do that thing. And I've used that a number of times, and it has never once failed me because either I really am ambiguous and it doesn't matter which way to go, and so then fine, or I actually really do know, and I'm the person telling myself that there's some reason why I can't do that thing that I know is what is the right thing for me to do. So that has been one that I've come back to for the last 19 years, and I always give my dad credit for that because it's a rock solid piece of advice.
So flipping the coin is really just a gut check, listening to your gut feeling.
Yep, because
I love that advice.
Almost never have I flipped the coin and been like, who cares? I'm ambivalent, like. Usually there's one where I'm like, please, please, please be this. And it's like, oh, okay, you never needed the coin. You just needed the coin to give you permission. You need to give yourself permission to do the thing you already know you need to do.
I think that is the best piece of advice entrepreneurs can have when starting a business or maybe growing a business is just do a gut check. Go somewhere quiet, sit there for a minute. You can run through all the pros and cons list and all the financials. If it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right.
Doesn't feel right.
That is a great piece of advice. Stick to your gut feeling, and however you do that, whether it's flipping a coin or find a system and do that. That's really awesome. So your restaurant, Winnie and Ethel's, it's on Charleston and Maryland Parkway.
Correct.
What hours are you guys open, and what days are you open? For now, you're going to keep adding 24 hours.
So if you're listening to this before April 1st of 2024, we're open. So we're closed on Tuesdays, Wednesday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday, Monday, 8 to 2. If you're listening to this after April 1st, we're going to be open 7 days a week. But yeah, it's we're right on the corner of Maryland Parkway and Charleston. So it's near, if you're coming from outside of Vegas, it's near the Arts District. It's in the Hunt Ridge Shopping Center. It's right near downtown Las Vegas.
And there's a lot of cool shops in that shopping center. I think Dapper Development, Jay Dapper did a great job in that area. And how can they how can they look up the restaurant? We obviously covered Instagram. You want to say it again, a website and the address?
Yep. So the website is winnieandethels.com. Instagram handle, very easy. It's the same, Winnie and Ethel. So the and is spelled out on both of them. We just launched, with the help of my Gen Z team members, TikTok. So we're Winnie and Ethel on TikTok. Winnie and Ethel's on TikTok also.
I'm gonna have to get TikTok just to follow you.
I have to get TikTok just to follow us. I literally yesterday was like, fine, I'll put TikTok on my phone, I guess. So yeah, and then we're also on Facebook, Winnie and Ethel's Downtown Diner. So
okay,
yeah.
And last question for you: how much has social media helped you in the business?
Huge. Huge. That's how we got our following when we were still just in the competition phase. We launched our Instagram account the day that we were announced as finalists.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, back in March of 2022 when we didn't even have a restaurant. The first people to sign up were like our parents.
I know, right?
But no, it's been huge for us. And like you said, we just started taking a little different tact and doing some things that are less
having fun with it.
Yeah, really.
Just it looks fun.
It is fun. Like, it's goofy and it's fun, and we're showing the food off, but we're doing it in a different way because, frankly, I got tired of having to do very scripted photo shoots, and those have their place. They're valuable, but I like having fun, so we just decided to give it a whirl and see how it goes.
So you're doing social media your way, and just being yourself. Yeah, social media. It's wild when you lean into it. It actually.
Turns out it does work.
Takes a lot of work, but
it's a huge lift, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being my
you.
very first podcast
Thank you.
podcast guest. That was a lot of fun.
I was
I
gonna
didn't
say
know what to expect.
when you're Joe Roganing in like 6 years, and then they go back to the oldest one, they'll be like, "Who's this lady with her beanie on? What?" Ugh. But no, this was awesome. Thank you for
that
having
time
me.
you're gonna have 50 million TikTok followers. No, when we were talking about doing this, I was thinking about who's easy to talk to, who's open to business, and I mean, the hour blew by in it feels like a few minutes. We went over an hour.
Oh,
so that's crazy.
good
So
job,
thank you
us.
again. Check out their restaurant.
Please do.
I frequent there. It is a good spot. They have some great things. So thank you, Mal. Thank you.
Thank you
And,
for having me.